Millionaire's wife didn't smile for 17 years, until a humble beggar said, "Can I help?" Jennifer Anderson gazed at the mansion's garden through the bedroom window, with the same empty look that had accompanied her for 17 long years. Everyone in the upscale Upper East Side neighborhood of New York City talked about the wife of the region's wealthiest businessman, who never showed joy, even though she had everything money could buy. That autumn morning, as yellow leaves lazily fell onto the immaculate garden, a humble-looking man approached the property's electronic gate. In his hands, he carried a small brown paper package decorated with a handmade red heart. "Good morning, ma'am," the man said, respectfully removing his gray cap when Jennifer came down to dismiss him personally. "I know you don't know me, but I can help you smile again." Jennifer stopped mid-step on the cobblestone path. How long had it been since someone even mentioned the word smile in her presence? The maid, Martha, quickly appeared behind her, ready to shoo away the unwanted visitor. "You shouldn't talk to this kind of person, Mrs. Anderson," Martha whispered, but something in the man's sincere gaze made Jennifer hesitate. "How do you know I need help?" she asked, surprised by her own voice speaking after so long in silence with strangers. The man smiled gently, revealing teeth that had seen better days, but his eyes shone with a light Jennifer hadn't seen reflected in any mirror for years. "My name is David Miller, but everyone calls me David. I recognize this kind of sadness, ma'am. I've carried a similar one myself." He extended the small package. "I made this for you. It's not worth much in money, but maybe it has another kind of value." Jennifer looked at the package skeptically. Michael, her husband, always warned her about people who approached them trying to take advantage. But there was something different about this man. He wasn't asking for anything, only offering. "Martha, go back inside," Jennifer said, startling the maid who had known her for 15 years. "I can handle myself." The maid obeyed reluctantly, but kept watching from the kitchen window. Jennifer accepted the package with slightly trembling hands. Inside was a small clay sculpture, rough but made with care, depicting a woman looking at the horizon. "Why did you make this?" she asked, delicately touching the little artwork. "Because sometimes we need someone to see us to remember we still exist beneath all that sadness," David replied, putting his cap back on. "May I come back tomorrow? I have more things I'd like to share with you." Jennifer felt something strange stirring in her chest, like a muscle that had been dormant for years trying to flex again. Before she could answer, the electronic gate opened and Michael's black Lexus pulled into the garage. "You'd better go," she said quickly, hiding the sculpture behind her back. David nodded and walked away calmly, as if he knew exactly what was happening. Michael stepped out of the car already on the phone, gesturing angrily about some deal that wasn't going as planned. "Who was that man?" he asked curtly, still scrolling through his phone. "No one important," Jennifer replied, climbing the front steps. "Just someone who got lost." That night, after Michael fell asleep, she sat staring at the small sculpture on her vanity. The last time someone had made something especially for her was when Emily, her daughter, had drawn a Mother's Day card in elementary school. That was long ago, before Emily left to study in England, and before Jennifer forgot how to smile. She touched her own face in the mirror, tracing the lines that sorrow had drawn around her eyes and mouth. When was the last time she had truly looked at herself, not just checked if she was presentable to accompany Michael to some social event? The next morning, Jennifer woke earlier than usual. She drank her coffee alone in the enormous kitchen, watching Martha prepare Michael's breakfast. The housekeeper, a 60-year-old woman who cared for the home with the dedication of someone who had put down roots there, seemed worried. "Did you sleep well, ma'am?" Martha asked, pouring coffee into a delicate porcelain cup. "Yes," Jennifer lied. In truth, she had spent the night thinking about David's words. How did he know she carried sadness? Was it that obvious? Around 10 o'clock, David appeared at the gate again. This time he carried a small basket with several clay pieces. Jennifer went down to meet him before Martha could intervene. "Good morning, Mrs. Anderson," he said, ever polite. "I brought some of my work. Thought you might like to see it." She approached the gate's bars, keeping a safe distance. Inside the basket were several small sculptures, each depicting a different emotion. A woman crying, another laughing, A child playing, a man gazing at the sky. Are you an artist? She asked, genuinely curious. I was, David replied, touching one of the pieces carefully. Now I do this so I don't forget who I used to be. There was a melancholy in his voice that Jennifer recognized instantly. It was the same tone she used when speaking of the days when she still had dreams of her own, before becoming just Michael Anderson's wife. May I keep one? She asked, pointing to a sculpture of a woman holding a flower. You may keep them all if you'd like, David said, passing the basket through the bars. They were made to be shared. Jennifer accepted the basket, feeling the weight of the small artworks in her hands. Each piece seemed to vibrate with its own life, as if carrying a fragment of its creator's soul. David, she called as he began to walk away. Why do you do this? Why care about a stranger? He stopped and turned, the morning sun casting a golden halo around his humble figure. Because sometimes when we help someone else find the light, we end up finding a little of our own too. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. After David left, Jennifer went upstairs carrying the basket as if it were a treasure. She hid the pieces in her closet, behind shoeboxes she hadn't touched in years. There was something freeing about having a secret, even a small one. At lunch, Michael casually mentioned that he had instructed the building's security to keep an eye out for beggars wandering the area. Too many vagrants showing up lately, he said, cutting his meat with surgical precision. I won't have these people taking advantage of our generosity. Jennifer nearly choked on a bite of potato. Generosity? When was the last time Michael had shown generosity to anyone who couldn't give him something in return? Maybe they just need help, she said calmly, testing the waters. Help? Michael set down his silverware and looked at her as if she'd said something absurd. Jennifer, these people choose to live like that. If they wanted to change, they would. It's not our responsibility to solve the world's problems. She nodded silently, as she always did when Michael voiced his firm opinions about the less fortunate. But this time, something inside her quietly rebelled against that coldness. That afternoon, while Michael was in business meetings, Jennifer took the hidden sculptures and spread them across the table in her old studio. Yes, she had a studio. 20 years ago, before getting married, she painted watercolors and even sold some pieces in small galleries. Michael always said it was a young lady's hobby, and little by little she put away her brushes. Looking at David's works, she felt a familiar pang in her chest. It was longing to create, to express, to feel that her hands were good for something more than holding champagne glasses at social events. Martha appeared at the studio door with a cup of tea. It's been so long since you've been here, the housekeeper said, glancing around the dusty space. I remember when you used to spend hours painting. You remember my paintings? Jennifer asked, surprised. Of course I do. I kept some in the attic when Mr. Anderson told us to pack everything away. I thought one day you might want to see them again. Jennifer's eyes welled up. Martha had saved her paintings. All these years, while she herself had forgotten she was once an artist, her housekeeper had preserved her works like precious relics. Martha, she said, holding the calloused hand of the woman who had cared for her for so long. Thank you. The housekeeper smiled, a smile full of maternal warmth that Jennifer hadn't felt since her own mother passed away. You've always been a special person, Mrs. Anderson. Sometimes we just need someone to remind us of that. That evening, Jennifer dined in silence while Michael recounted his business triumphs of the day. She watched him talk, gesture, laugh at his own jokes, and wondered when she had stopped truly listening to him, or when he had stopped saying things worth hearing. Are you listening to me? Michael asked suddenly. Of course, she replied automatically. So what do you think about expanding the business to Chicago? Jennifer blinked, realizing she hadn't heard a word about Chicago. I think you should do what you think is best, she said, using the standard response she had perfected over the years. Michael seemed satisfied and kept talking. Jennifer drifted back into thoughts of David and his sculptures. There was something in the simplicity of those pieces that touched a part of her that had been dormant for so long. The next day, David didn't show up. Jennifer caught herself glancing at the gate more often than she cared to admit. Had the security in the complex turned him away? The thought unsettled her in a way she couldn't explain. In the afternoon, she decided to take a walk around the neighborhood, something she hadn't done in years. Martha was worried, but Jennifer insisted she needed fresh air. She strolled through the tree-lined streets of the Upper East Side, admiring the grand mansions and wondering how many other women lived empty lives behind those perfect facades. As she was heading back home, she saw David sitting on a nearby bench, working on a new sculpture. He hadn't noticed her. He was completely absorbed in the clay between his hands. Jennifer watched from a distance, struck by the devotion in his work, the way his fingers shaped the clay with love and patience. She approached slowly, as if afraid to break some spell. "May I see?" she asked. David looked up, surprised but happy to see her. "Of course, Mrs. Anderson. This one is special." He showed her the piece he was creating. It was a woman holding a bird, about to set it free. "It's beautiful," she said, gently touching the still damp clay. "What does it mean?" "Freedom," David replied simply. "Sometimes we hold on to the things we love, thinking we're protecting them. But too much protection can be a prison." Jennifer looked at the sculpture and then at her own hands. When was the last time she felt free to do something simply because she wanted to? When was the last time she made a decision without first considering Michael's opinion? "David," she said hesitantly, "how do you know so much about sadness?" He stopped working on the sculpture and gazed at the horizon for a moment before answering. "I used to be a different person, Mrs. Anderson. I had a life, a family, a career. I lost it all at once, not because of cruelty or some cruel twist of fate, but because of choices I made. Sadness has taught me many things, mostly that it isn't permanent, but you have to want to let it go." "And have you managed to let it go?" "I'm trying," he said, returning to shaping the clay. "Every piece I make is a little piece of my sadness turning into something else. Art, beauty, connection with other people. It's my way of turning pain into something useful." Jennifer stayed there for another hour, watching David work and talking about small things that, surprisingly, felt big. When she finally noticed the time, Michael was already home. "I should go," she said, rising from the park bench. "Mrs. Anderson," David called as she began to walk away. "You're welcome here any time. No special reason needed." She nodded and walked back home, feeling as though each step carried her from one world to another. David's world was simple, honest, full of possibilities. Her own world was gilded, but empty. Michael was waiting in the living room, visibly irritated. "Where were you?" "Martha said you went for a walk, but that was 2 hours ago." "I lost track of time," she replied, slipping off the shoes that had hurt her feet, unaccustomed to long walks. "Jennifer, you can't just wander off without telling anyone. This isn't just any neighborhood. You're Michael Anderson's wife. There are people who might want to hurt us." She looked at her husband, really looked. When had he become so paranoid, or had she simply stopped paying attention? "Michael, when was the last time we talked, really talked?" He seemed confused by the question. "We talk every day, Jennifer. Over breakfast, at dinner." "No," she interrupted. "When was the last time you asked me how I feel, what I think, what I dream about?" Michael fell silent for a moment, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Jennifer, you're acting strange. That walk wasn't good for you. Maybe you should schedule an appointment with Dr. Thompson." Dr. Thompson, the family psychiatrist who always prescribed medication for any display of emotion Michael deemed inappropriate. Jennifer had taken anti-anxiety pills for years until she secretly decided to stop 6 months ago. That was when she began feeling things again, even if it was mostly sadness. "I don't need a doctor, Michael. I need a conversation." "About what?" "About us. About me. About who I was before I became just your wife." Michael sighed as if dealing with a difficult child. "Jennifer, you're being dramatic. You have everything a woman could want: a beautiful home, money, security. What more do you need?" The question hung in the air like a ghost. What more did she need? Maybe she needed to remember who she was when she still knew the answer to that question. That night, lying beside Michael as he slept soundly, Jennifer stared at the ceiling and allowed herself to cry for the first time in years. They weren't tears of despair, but of recognition. She was acknowledging parts of herself she had buried so deeply she'd forgotten they existed. The next morning, she woke with a strange determination. She dressed in comfortable clothes instead of the elaborate outfits she usually wore and went downstairs for breakfast before Michael woke up. "You woke up early today," Martha commented, serving fresh coffee. "Martha," Jennifer said, gathering her courage, "could you show me my old paintings, the ones you stored in the attic?" The housekeeper's face lit up. "Of course, Mrs. Anderson, I always hoped you'd ask for them." They went up to the attic together, a space Jennifer had avoided for years because it was filled with archived memories. Martha had organized everything carefully, protecting the canvases with plastic and storing the brushes in labeled boxes. When Jennifer saw her works again, it felt like reuniting with a long-lost friend. There were delicate landscapes, expressive portraits, still lifes full of life. It was hard to believe the same hands that now trembled with emotion had once created so much beauty. "They're beautiful, Mrs. Anderson," Martha said. "I always thought you should have kept painting." "Why didn't I?" Jennifer asked, more to herself than to Martha. "I think you stopped believing you deserved something just for yourself," Martha replied, with the wisdom of someone who observes everything closely. The answer hit Jennifer like a punch to the gut. That was exactly it. At some point, she had decided she didn't deserve her own dreams, that her role was only to support Michael's ambitions and be the perfect wife. "Martha, do you think I still have time?" "Time for what, ma'am?" "To be myself again." The housekeeper smiled and held Jennifer's hands in hers. "Ma'am, it's never too late to be who you really are. The person you were didn't die. She was just asleep." At that moment, Jennifer made a decision that would change everything. She would set up her studio again. She would start painting once more. And she would talk to David whenever she wanted, because she had finally realized she needed people who saw her as she truly was, not as they expected her to be. When Michael came down for breakfast, he found Jennifer organizing painting supplies on the dining table. "What is this?" he asked, visibly annoyed. "My painting supplies," she replied calmly. "I'm going to paint again." "Jennifer, we've discussed this. You're too old for these artistic fantasies. And where did you even get all this?" "Martha saved them for me. And as for my age, I'm 42, Michael. I'm not some disposable old woman." Michael turned red with anger. He wasn't used to being contradicted, especially by Jennifer, who for years had simply agreed with everything he said. "You've been acting very strangely lately. First these pointless walks, now this painting nonsense. Are you sure you don't want to talk to Dr. Thompson?" "I'm sure I don't want to talk to Dr. Thompson," she said, sorting brushes by size. "But maybe you should, to understand why the idea of your wife having her own hobby bothers you so much." The argument was interrupted by the doorbell. David was at the gate, carrying a sculpture larger than the others. Jennifer saw him through the window and felt her heart race. "That freeloader again," Michael said, heading for the intercom. "I'm putting an end to this nonsense." "No," Jennifer said, grabbing her husband's arm. "I'll answer it. Jennifer, I forbid you to speak to that man." She stopped and looked at Michael with an expression he didn't recognize. Determination mixed with something he hadn't seen in a long time. Her own will. "You forbid me?" she asked slowly. "Yes. As your husband, I have the right to protect you from inappropriate influences." "Michael," she said, walking toward the gate, "you may have rights over many things, but not over who I choose to talk to." She walked out, leaving Michael stunned. It was the first time in 17 years of marriage that Jennifer had openly disobeyed him. David waited for her outside the gate, holding a sculpture of a family embracing. "Good morning, Mrs. Anderson. I hope I'm not bothering you." "Oh, you are," she said, watching David's expression shift to disappointment. "You're bothering my husband, and today that makes me very happy." David smiled, understanding the irony in her reply. "I made this with you in mind," he said, showing her the sculpture. "It's a family where each person keeps their individuality while still being united." Jennifer examined the piece carefully. Each figure in the sculpture was connected to the others, but retained unique features, its own personality. It was the exact opposite of the dynamic in her marriage, where she had completely dissolved into Michael's dominant presence. "It's perfect," she said. "May I keep it?" "Of course. But this time I have a condition." "What is it?" "I want you to tell me something about yourself, something no one else knows." Jennifer fell silent for a moment. There was so much about her she no longer even knew herself. How could she share with a stranger things she had hidden even from herself? "I used to dream of having an art exhibition in a famous gallery," she finally said. "When I was young, I thought one day my paintings would hang on important walls, that people would stop to look at them and feel something special." "And why did you stop dreaming of that?" "Because I learned dreams are luxuries married women can't afford." David looked at her with sadness and understanding. "Mrs. Anderson, with all due respect, whoever taught you that was wrong. Dreams aren't luxuries, they're necessities. A person without dreams is like a plant without light. It might survive for a while, but it'll never bloom." David's words echoed in her mind as she walked back home, carrying the new sculpture. Michael was waiting in the living room, pacing like a caged lion. "Jennifer, we need to talk seriously." "I agree," she said, placing the sculpture on the shelf beside her other pieces. "There's a lot we need to discuss. First, you'll stop talking to that man. Second, you'll put away these ridiculous trinkets. Third, you'll start behaving like the wife of a respectable businessman again." Jennifer looked at Michael as if seeing him for the first time. When had he become so controlling? Or had she become so submissive she hadn't noticed? "And what if I don't want to do any of those things?" The question left Michael speechless for a few seconds. "So you're choosing some worthless stranger over your own husband?" "No, Michael. I'm choosing myself for the first time in 17 years. The argument that followed was the most intense they'd ever had. Michael yelled, threatened, tried emotional blackmail. Jennifer remained calm, a calm that came from a deep place she had rediscovered. It was the calm of someone who had finally stopped denying her own existence. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now, continuing. The atmosphere at home grew tense in the following days. Michael barely spoke to Jennifer, communicating through Martha when necessary. Jennifer, in turn, used this hostile silence as an opportunity to rediscover herself. She set up her studio again, cleaned each brush with care, prepared her palette as if performing a sacred ritual. The first stroke on the blank canvas felt like breathing for the first time after years of holding her breath. David kept coming by daily, always with a new creation or an interesting story to share. Jennifer discovered that he had been a psychologist before his life took an unexpected turn. He had lost his license to practice after a difficult period when depression kept him from fulfilling his professional duties. "But you still help people," Jennifer observed during one of their conversations in the park. "In your own way, you're still a healer of souls." "Maybe," said David, shaping a new piece of clay. "But now I do it more honestly. I don't pretend to have answers I don't. I just offer companionship to those walking alone." Jennifer had started meeting David every afternoon in the park. She brought a book or her sketchpad, and they spent hours talking about art, life, lost dreams, and dreams that could still come true. It was during one of these afternoons that Emily called from England. "Mom, how are you?" her daughter asked, her voice filled with longing. "Good," Jennifer replied, and for the first time in years she wasn't lying. "Actually, I'm rediscovering who I am." "What do you mean?" Jennifer told her daughter about David, about the sculptures, about painting again. Emily was silent for a long moment. "Mom, you sound different. Your voice is different." "How so?" "You sound alive. It's been so long since I've heard you talk about things you love, things that make you happy. Do you remember when I used to paint?" "Of course I do. I loved watching you paint. You were so focused, so present. I always wondered why you stopped." "Because I thought it wasn't important, that being a mother and wife was enough." "Mom," Emily said seriously, "you've always been a wonderful mother. But I grew up thinking women had to give up on themselves to take care of their families. Only now, living alone here, have I realized how much that affected me. The conversation with Emily was eye-opening. Jennifer realized her daughter had grown up believing women weren't entitled to their own dreams, that their only purpose was to serve others. It was exactly the lesson she had learned, and unwittingly passed on. "Emily, what if I told you I'm thinking of exhibiting my new paintings?" "Really?" her daughter nearly shouted with joy. "Mom, that would be amazing. You've always been so talented. Your father wouldn't approve." "Mom, with all due respect, when was the last time Dad cared about what you wanted? When was the last time he even asked how you felt?" Emily's question confirmed something Jennifer had long suspected. Even her daughter had noticed how much she had faded over the years. That evening, during the silent dinner that had become routine, Jennifer gathered the courage to speak. "Michael, Emily called today." "How is she?" he asked without looking up from his plate. "Good. And happy to hear I've started painting again." Michael dropped his silverware with a clatter. "You told our daughter about this phase you're going through." "I told our daughter I've rediscovered a passion I'd unfairly abandoned." "Jennifer, enough. This joke has gone on too long. You'll stop with this painting nonsense, stop talking to that deadbeat and go back to being the woman I married. What if the woman you married doesn't exist anymore?" "What are you saying?" Jennifer took a deep breath, ready to voice what had been growing inside her for weeks. "I'm saying maybe you married a version of me I created to please you, and now I'm discovering who I really am. That's ridiculous. Is it ridiculous to want to be happy? To have my own identity?" "You have an identity. You're Jennifer Anderson, my wife, Emily's mother." "No, Michael, that's the identity you gave me. But who am I beyond that? What do I love? What do I want? What makes me happy?" Michael fell silent, clearly uncomfortable with the questions. "You can't answer, can you?" Jennifer continued. "Because for years you've only cared about me as an extension of yourself, not as a separate person." "Jennifer, you're talking nonsense. I love you. You love the idea you have of me. But do you really know me? Do you know my favorite color? My favorite movie? What makes me sad besides your indifference?" Each question was a small revelation of how much they had become strangers to each other. Michael tried to answer some of them, but his responses were vague or completely wrong. "You see?" Jennifer said sadly. "We've lived together for 17 years, but you don't know me. And I lost myself so much trying to be who you wanted me to be that I didn't know myself anymore." The conversation ended with Michael leaving the room, clearly frustrated. Jennifer stayed alone at the dining table, but she didn't feel lonely. There was a difference between being alone and feeling lonely, and she was starting to understand that distinction. In the following days, Michael tried a different approach. Instead of direct confrontation, he began using subtler tactics. He brought flowers, suggested trips, bought expensive jewelry. Everything except what Jennifer truly wanted, to be seen and understood. "Why don't you try to understand what I'm going through?" she asked one morning as he placed an expensive diamond necklace on her coffee table. "I'm trying to give you everything you want," he replied. "But you didn't ask what I want. You decided what I should want." "Jennifer, all women want security, comfort, nice things." "All women are different people, Michael, with different desires, different dreams. I'm not all women. I'm me." The concept seemed genuinely difficult for Michael to grasp. He had grown up in a generation where roles were clearly defined, where women were seen as variations of the same basic theme. The idea that Jennifer could have complex, unique emotional needs didn't fit into his worldview. Meanwhile, her friendship with David continued to blossom. He had become more than just someone who made beautiful sculptures. He was a confidant, someone who truly listened when she spoke. Through their conversations, Jennifer was rediscovering not only who she was, but who she could become. "David, can I ask you a personal question?" she said during one of their meetings in the square. "Of course." "How did you lose everything? You mentioned you had a family, a career." David stopped working the clay and looked at the horizon. It was a story he rarely told, but he felt Jennifer deserved to hear it. "I was married to a wonderful woman, Rachel. We had a little girl, Sophie. I worked too much, always focused on building a brilliant career in psychology. I thought I was doing everything right. building a good life for them. He paused, nervously shaping the clay between his fingers. One day, Rachel told me she felt alone in our marriage, that I was never present, even when I was physically at home. I told her she was exaggerating, that everything I did was for our family. And then? Then she asked for a divorce. She took Sophie and went to live with her mother in another city. I was in shock. How could she not understand I was working for us? Jennifer listened to the story with a pang of recognition. It was like seeing her own marriage from a different perspective. Was that when you lost everything? No, David continued. That was when I started losing everything. I became obsessed with bringing them back. I neglected my patients, started drinking, stopped fulfilling my professional duties. I lost my license to practice psychology. I lost the house. And when I finally mustered the courage to look for Rachel to ask for a second chance, he paused, clearly emotional. She had met someone else, someone who was there when she needed, someone who truly listened to her. Sophie called me uncle when she played with him. I had become a stranger in my own daughter's life. David, I'm so sorry. Don't pity me, Mrs. Anderson. In a way, this story has a happy ending. Losing everything taught me to value the right things. Today, Rachel is my friend, Sophie visits me on holidays, and I've learned that presence means more than presence, that attention is worth more than money. Is that why you decided to help others? That's why I decided to live more honestly, and sometimes that means helping people stuck in the same traps I was in. David's story touched Jennifer deeply. She saw parallels with her own situation, but from a different perspective. Michael wasn't exactly like David had been, but there were similarities in how both had stopped truly seeing their wives as complex, independent people. That night, she tried to talk to Michael about David's story, hoping to use it as a bridge to discuss their own issues. Michael, today I heard an interesting story about a man who lost his family because he stopped being truly present in their lives. If it's a story from that deadbeat, I'm not interested, he replied, without taking his eyes off the TV. But it's a story that might teach us something about ourselves. Jennifer, we have nothing in common with that man's life story. He's a failure who lost everything because of his incompetence. I'm a successful man who built a solid life for my family. But are you really present in our lives? Or do you just provide financial security? Providing financial security isn't nothing. Most people would kill to have what you have. Michael, I'm not questioning your ability to provide for us. I'm asking if you see me as a real person, with my own feelings and needs. Of course I do. You're my wife. No. Being your wife is my role in your life. But who am I beyond that? Again, Michael had no answer, and again Jennifer realized just how far they had drifted apart emotionally over the years. That was when she made a decision that even surprised herself. The next day, she approached David with an unusual proposal. David, do you think it would be possible to organize a small exhibition of my paintings? David stopped what he was doing and looked at her in surprise. Of course it's possible. But why? Because I need to do something for myself, something that proves I still exist as an independent person. I need to remember that I have talent, that I can create beautiful things, that I'm more than just a decorative wife. Mrs. Anderson, that's wonderful. Where would you like to hold this exhibition? I don't know. Do you know any places? David thought for a moment. I know the owner of a small gallery downtown. He's a good man who believes in giving opportunities to artists. I can talk to him if you'd like. The idea of an exhibition was both thrilling and terrifying. It had been years since Jennifer had shown her work to anyone but Martha. The possibility of displaying her art publicly made her feel vulnerable in a way she hadn't in a long time. What if no one likes it? She asked, voicing her fears. What if everyone does? David replied with a smile. Mrs. Anderson, the fear of failure can't be greater than the desire to try. In the weeks that followed, Jennifer threw herself into painting. She woke up early, before Michael left for work, and spent hours in the studio creating. She was painting with a passion she hadn't felt in decades, each brushstroke loaded with emotions she had repressed for years. Martha became her first admirer and constructive critic. The housekeeper spent part of her day in the studio, offering coffee and encouraging conversations. You seem different when you paint, Martha observed. You look more alive. That's how I feel, Jennifer replied, mixing colors on her palette. Like I'm waking up from a very long sleep. Mr. Anderson isn't too fond of this change, is he? Jennifer sighed. Michael had grown increasingly hostile toward her artistic rediscovery. He made sarcastic remarks, questioned the time she spent painting, and made it clear he saw the whole situation as a passing whim. Martha, can I ask you something? Do you think Michael truly loves me? The housekeeper visibly tensed at the question. Ma'am, it's not my place to judge. Please, Martha, you've known us for 15 years. You watch us every day. What do you see? Martha took a deep breath before answering. I see a man who likes to control everything around him, including you. He treats you well by his standards, but I don't see you as a separate person to him. To him, you're an extension of the life he's built. And is that love? I don't know, ma'am. But I do know real love should include respect for the other person's individuality. And in recent years, whenever you showed any sign of your own personality, he tried to suppress it. Martha's observation confirmed something Jennifer had suspected, but hadn't dared admit. Her marriage wasn't based on mutual love, but on an agreement where she provided the image of a perfect wife in exchange for material security. Martha, do you think I'm being selfish for wanting more? Ma'am, the housekeeper said with maternal warmth, wanting to be happy isn't selfish. It's every person's right. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now, back to the story. The conversation with Martha was the final push Jennifer needed. She called David and confirmed she wanted to move forward with the exhibition. I spoke with Richard, the gallery owner, David said when they met. He's interested in seeing your work. He can come by next week to view the paintings. The thought of having her work evaluated by a professional made her nervous but also excited. It was as if a dormant part of her was finally awakening. When the day of Richard's visit arrived, Jennifer had prepared a selection of 15 paintings. They represented her journey over the past months, from melancholic landscapes depicting her earlier sadness to vibrant portraits showing her renewed connection with life. Richard was a middle-aged man with graying hair and kind eyes that revealed decades of experience in the art world. He examined each piece carefully, offering technical comments and asking about Jennifer's inspirations. How long has it been since you last exhibited? He asked. I've never exhibited professionally, Jennifer admitted. These are practically the first works I've shown to anyone outside the family. Richard looked surprised. That's impressive. You have a mature style, solid technique. It doesn't look like the work of someone without exhibition experience. I painted when I was young, but stopped for many years. I only recently started again. And what made you return? Jennifer glanced at David, who was quietly observing from the corner of the room. A friend reminded me there was still life in me. Richard smiled, sensing there was a deeper story behind that answer. Jennifer, I'd like to propose a solo exhibition for you. Nothing too grand to start, but a real chance to show your work to the public. Jennifer's heart raced. A solo exhibition. It was more than she had ever dreamed of. When? She asked, trying to control her excitement. In 2 months. That would give you time to prepare some additional pieces if you'd like, and for us to do proper promotion. After Richard left, Jennifer and David were alone in the room, surrounded by the paintings that would soon hang on the walls of a gallery. You did it, David said, clearly proud. You're going to have your exhibition. I still can't believe this is happening, she replied, gently touching one of her canvases. 6 months ago, I didn't even remember I could paint. Sometimes we just need someone to remind us of who we are, beneath who we think we should be. That night, Jennifer told Michael about the exhibition. His reaction was exactly what she expected, but it still hurt. This is ridiculous, Jennifer. You're going to humiliate yourself publicly. Why would it be humiliating? Because you're not a professional artist. You'll look like a bored, rich woman playing at being an artist. What if I'm good? What if people like my work? Jennifer, be realistic. You're 42. Real artists start young, dedicate their whole lives to art. You can't expect to compete with that. Michael's words cut like knives, but this time Jennifer didn't let them shake her. She had grown so much in the past few months, developing an inner strength she hadn't had before. Michael, have you seen my recent paintings? I've seen a few, they're nice, I admit. But there's a difference between painting as a hobby and presenting yourself as a professional artist. You're afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that I'm good. Afraid that I have real talent. Afraid that I could be more than just your wife. Michael visibly stiffened at the remark. That's absurd. Is it? Then why are you so determined to discourage me? If you really loved me, shouldn't you be happy I found something that makes me happy? I'm worried about you. I don't want to see you disappointed when you realize this is just a fantasy. Or maybe you don't want to see me succeed at something that doesn't depend on you. The conversation ended with Michael storming out of the house, slamming the door. Jennifer was alone, but she didn't feel abandoned. For the first time, she felt she was on the right path, even if it was a lonely one. In the following weeks, she threw herself into preparing for the exhibition. She painted several new pieces, worked with Richard on the final selection, and even helped write the catalogue text. Emily called from England, thrilled by the news of the exhibition. "Mom, I'm so proud of you. I'll try to get time off work to be there for the opening." "You'd do that?" "Of course I would. This is a historic moment. My mom fulfilling a dream she gave up so many years ago." "And your father? Have you spoken to him?" "I have. He's not too excited, but he said he'll show up." Jennifer wasn't sure if Michael's presence would be positive or negative, but she knew she had to move forward regardless of his opinion. David remained a constant support throughout the process. He helped her choose frames, gave suggestions on the layout of the works, and most importantly, offered encouragement during moments of doubt. "David, what if no one comes?" she asked a few days before the opening. "Then you'll have a private exhibition for the few who truly matter," he wisely replied. "But I'm sure many people will come. Richard has a good reputation, and your art speaks for itself. Will you be there?" "I wouldn't miss it for anything. It'll be my honor to see you shine." The week before the exhibition was filled with conflicting emotions. Jennifer wavered between excitement and terror, confidence and insecurity. Martha became her main confidant, offering tea and words of encouragement whenever doubts arose. "You seem different," Martha observed a few days before the opening. "Lighter, despite the nervousness." "How so?" "In recent years, you carried a very heavy sadness. Now I see hope in your eyes, as if you finally found something you've been searching for a long time." "Martha, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course, ma'am." "For the first time in 17 years, I'm looking forward to tomorrow, not because something bad is ending, but because something good might begin." Martha smiled with tears in her eyes. "That's the best secret you've ever told me." 2 days before the exhibition, Michael made one last attempt to dissuade Jennifer. "There's still time to cancel," he said during dinner. "I can call this Richard and explain you've changed your mind." "Why would you do that?" "To avoid an embarrassing situation. Jennifer, you're not ready for this. You have no experience. You don't know the art world. It'll be humiliating." "Michael, have you ever seen an exhibition of mine to know if it'll be humiliating?" "I don't need to see. I know the standards of the art world." "You do? When was the last time you visited an art gallery? When was the last time you spoke to a professional artist?" Michael fell silent, clearly without an answer. "You're talking about a world you don't know, about a person you also don't know," Jennifer continued. "For years you've decided what's best for me without asking what I want. This time the decision is mine." "Jennifer, you're making a mistake." "Maybe, but it'll be my mistake. And if it works, it'll be my success." The night before the exhibition, Jennifer barely slept. She lay staring at the ceiling, thinking of all the paths that had led her to this moment, the inexplicable sadness that had followed her for so many years, meeting David, rediscovering painting, the courage to move forward despite Michael's opposition. She got out of bed and went to the studio, where her latest paintings were still drying. Each piece told a part of her story: the loneliness, the discovery, the transformation, the hope. It was as if she hadn't just painted images, but chapters of her own journey back to life. Martha appeared at the studio door with a cup of hot tea. "Can't sleep, Ma'am. I'm too nervous. What if people don't understand what I tried to express? Ma'am, art isn't about people understanding. It's about them feeling. And your paintings make us feel a lot. What do you feel when you look at them?" Martha studied the works for a moment before answering. "I feel the pain you carried, but also the strength you found to move past it. I see a woman who was lost and then found herself again. It's a beautiful story, ma'am, one many people will relate to." On the morning of the opening, Jennifer woke with a strange calm. The nervousness had given way to serene determination. She dressed carefully, choosing a dress she'd bought especially for the occasion. It wasn't extravagant, but it made her feel confident and elegant. Michael was visibly tense during breakfast. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" he asked one last time. "I am," she replied without hesitation. "Then I'll be there. As your husband, I'll support you, even if I disagree with the decision." Jennifer looked at him, trying to decipher whether there was sincerity in those words or just a sense of social duty. "Michael, thank you. That means a lot to me." In the afternoon, she went to the gallery for the final preparations. Richard and his team had done a wonderful job setting up. The paintings were arranged in a way that told a visual story, guiding visitors through an emotional journey. David arrived shortly after her, carrying a small sculpture. "I made this for you," he said, handing her a piece depicting a woman with open arms, looking up at the sky. "To remind you that you flew." Mrs. Anderson felt her eyes fill with tears. "David, I'll never be able to thank you enough." "You don't have to thank me. You did it all yourself. I just reminded you that you were capable." People began arriving around 7 in the evening. First came some of Richard's friends, other artists and regular collectors from the gallery. Mrs. Anderson nervously watched their reactions, trying to decipher what they thought of her work. Then Emily arrived, having managed to get a last-minute flight from England. Mother and daughter embraced emotionally. "Mom, it's beautiful," Emily exclaimed, looking around the gallery. "Your paintings are stunning." "Do you really think so?" "I think you've always been an artist. You just forgot for a while. These pieces, they tell such a powerful story." Michael arrived around 8, accompanied by some business associates. Mrs. Anderson could see he was clearly uncomfortable, but he made an effort to greet people and observe the paintings. As the night progressed, she noticed people were genuinely connecting with her work. She saw tears in the eyes of an older woman gazing at a painting about loneliness. She overheard positive comments from critics Richard had invited. Some pieces already had red dots, indicating they'd been sold. The most moving moment came when a young woman approached her. "Are you the artist?" the girl asked. "I am," Mrs. Anderson replied, still getting used to the title. "Your paintings really moved me, especially this one," she said, pointing to a piece showing a woman looking through a window. "My mom's going through a hard time. She's felt so alone since my dad passed. Could I bring her here? I think it would help her see that others have gone through similar things and found hope." "Of course," Mrs. Anderson said, deeply touched. "Your mother will always be welcome." It was then that she understood the true value of art. It wasn't about perfect technique or critical acclaim. It was about human connection, about touching people's lives, about transforming pain into beauty and offering hope to those still struggling. Around 10, when the gallery was full of lively conversations, Richard approached Mrs. Anderson with a huge smile. "Jennifer, you should know. This is one of the most successful openings I've ever organized. We've sold 12 pieces, several people are interested in commissioning new work, and 3 journalists have requested interviews with you." Mrs. Anderson looked around the gallery, seeing her paintings surrounded by people admiring, discussing, and being moved by them. It was more than she'd ever dreamed. "Richard, is this real? Am I dreaming?" "It's very real, and it's just the beginning. You have talent, a story to tell, and emotional depth that shines through your art. The future is bright." She searched for David with her eyes and found him talking to Michael near one of her paintings. Their conversation seemed serious but not hostile. Seeing them together, Mrs. Anderson felt as though 2 very different worlds of her life were perhaps for the first time trying to understand each other. Emily appeared beside her, beaming with pride. "Mom, do you see how many people are here? How moved they are by your paintings?" "I see it, but I'm still having trouble believing it. You know what moves me the most? Seeing you genuinely smile. How many years has it been since I've seen you like this?" It was true. Mrs. Anderson hadn't realized it, but she was smiling. Not a polite social smile, but a genuine one that came from within, fueled by a happiness she had forgotten was possible to feel. When Michael approached them, Jennifer expected a critical remark or a negative observation. Instead, he spoke softly. "Jennifer, I owe you an apology." "Why?" "Because I was wrong. Your paintings they're powerful. And seeing how people are reacting to them, I never imagined you had this talent." "You never asked," she said without bitterness, simply stating a fact. "That's true. And talking to David earlier, I realized some things about myself that aren't very comfortable." "What kind of things?" Michael hesitated before answering. "That maybe I spent years trying to turn you into who I thought you should be, instead of discovering who you really were." It was the first time in 17 years that Michael admitted he was wrong about something related to their marriage. Jennifer felt a mix of surprise and sadness that it had taken so long for this realization to come. "Michael, I appreciate you saying that, but I don't know if it's too late for us," he finished. "Maybe it is. Maybe I've lost the amazing woman I married because I was too busy trying to shape her to my liking." "You didn't lose me, Michael. You just never truly looked for me." The conversation was interrupted when Richard called everyone's attention for a toast. Jennifer found herself at the center of the gallery, surrounded by people who had connected with her art. People who saw her as an artist, a creator, someone with something important to say. "Jennifer," said Richard, raising his glass, "thank you for reminding us that it's never too late to rediscover who we are, to follow our dreams, to turn our pain into beauty." Everyone toasted, and Jennifer felt overwhelming emotion. It wasn't just about the successful exhibition or the paintings sold. It was about proving to herself that there was still life in her, that she was still capable of creating, of touching others, of being more than just a shadow of the person she used to be. When the night ended and the gallery emptied, only Jennifer, David, Emily, Michael, and Richard remained. They stood in silence for a moment, looking at the paintings illuminated by the gallery's soft light. "Mom," said Emily, breaking the silence, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What are you going to do now? I mean, after all this?" It was a question Jennifer hadn't yet asked herself. She had focused so much on reaching this moment that she hadn't thought about what would come next. "I'll keep painting," she finally said. "I'll keep exploring who I am when I'm not trying to be who others expect me to be." "What about us?" Michael asked hesitantly. "Is there room to start over?" Jennifer looked at her husband for a long moment. She saw in him not the controlling man he had become, but traces of the person she had fallen in love with so many years ago. But she also saw clearly all the changes she had gone through in the past few months. "Michael, I'm not the same person who married you anymore, and I suspect you've changed over the years too. Maybe we need to get to know each other again before deciding if we still work together. Would you be willing to try?" "I'd be willing to try a new version of us. Not a return to what we were, but a discovery of who we can be now." David smiled discreetly, sensing his mission here was complete. Jennifer had found not just her art again, but also her voice, her strength, her own identity. "Mrs. Anderson," he said, preparing to leave, "it's been an honor to be part of your journey back home." "David, you're not leaving, are you?" "I mean, now that I have a new life to build, I need my friends close by. I'm not going anywhere. But now you don't need someone to remind you of who you are anymore. You already know." 3 months after the exhibition, Jennifer Anderson's life had changed in ways she never imagined. Her paintings were being displayed in other galleries, she had received several commissions, and most importantly, she had found a community of artists and admirers who saw her for who she truly was. Michael Anderson was in therapy, trying to understand the behavioral patterns that had nearly destroyed their marriage. They were slowly rebuilding their relationship, basing it on who they really were rather than the roles they had played for so long. Emily had decided to return to the US, inspired by her mother's transformation and wanting to be part of this new chapter for the family. David continued creating his sculptures and, surprisingly, had started giving talks about overcoming adversity and personal transformation. His friendship with Jennifer had become one of the cornerstones of his own healing journey. Martha, of course, remained the wise observer of the entire transformation, offering tea and wisdom in equal measure. One autumn afternoon, exactly a year after her first meeting with David, Jennifer was in her studio when she heard the doorbell. To her surprise, it was a young woman she had seen at the exhibition. "Mrs. Anderson, my name is Jessica. I came to your exhibition a few months ago with my mother." "Of course, I remember you. How is your mother?" "Much better. Much. In fact, she started painting too, inspired by your story. But I came here for another reason." "What is it?" "My neighbor is going through a situation similar to what you went through. She's been married for many years, has everything materially, but she's completely lost her joy for life. She asked me to see if you might talk to her." Jennifer smiled, recognizing a familiar pattern, a lost person seeking guidance from someone who had found their way back to themselves. "Of course I can talk to her. Bring her here next week." After Jessica left, Jennifer reflected on how life had curious ways of completing circles. She, who had received help from David in her darkest moment, was now in a position to offer light to someone else walking the same path of darkness. She picked up a brush and a fresh canvas, preparing to create another piece. But this time, she wasn't painting her own journey of transformation. She was painting hope. Hope for all the people still lost, who didn't yet know it was possible to rediscover who they truly were beneath the roles life had imposed on them. As she painted, Martha appeared with tea, as always. "Ma'am, may I make an observation?" "Of course." "You're smiling." Jennifer stopped painting and looked at her reflection in the window. It was true. She was smiling. Not just in that moment, but constantly. The smile had become part of her natural expression again. "You know, Martha, 17 years ago I stopped smiling because I thought I had no reason to. Today I realize that a smile doesn't come from external reasons. It comes from being at peace with who we are." "And are you at peace with yourself?" "I am," Jennifer answered without hesitation. "For the first time in a long while, I am." That evening, during a family dinner, Emily had returned for good from abroad. Jennifer looked around the table and saw not just people fulfilling familiar roles, but unique individuals learning to truly know themselves. Michael was different, more attentive, asking about others' feelings instead of just sharing his own plans. Emily had matured, having watched her mother transform from an example of submission into a model of courage and authenticity. "Mom," said Emily during dessert, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you regret taking so long to find the courage to change?" Jennifer thought for a moment before answering. "I don't regret it, Emily. Every experience, even the pain, taught me something important. If I had changed earlier, I might not have the emotional maturity I have now. Maybe I wouldn't be able to help others going through what I went through. So you think everything happened at the right time?" "I think nothing happens by chance. David came into my life exactly when I was ready to hear what he had to say. If he had appeared 5 years earlier, I probably would have ignored him." Michael, who had stayed quiet during the conversation, finally spoke. "Jennifer, I know we're still rebuilding our relationship, but I want you to know something." "What?" "I'm proud of you. Proud of the courage you had, of the incredible woman you chose to become, and I'm sorry for trying to stop it for so long." It was the most honest and vulnerable statement Michael had made in years. Jennifer saw in it not just an apology, but the acknowledgement of a real change in how he viewed relationships. "Michael, thank you. That means a lot to me. And I want to learn to truly know you this time. Not the woman I thought you should be, but who you really are." Later that night, when everyone had gone to bed, Jennifer stepped into the garden and looked at the stars. It had been a long time since she'd observed the night sky. Before, when she looked out the window, she only saw the emptiness of her own existence reflected in the dark. Now she saw endless possibilities shining in the darkness. She thought of David, who was somewhere in the city, probably working on a new sculpture or talking to another lost soul in need of guidance. She thought about how a chance encounter had completely changed the course of her life. But then she realized it hadn't really been chance. David had appeared because she was ready for change. He had offered help because deep down, she was willing to accept it. The transformation had come from within her. David had simply provided the tools and encouragement. A year and a half after that first meeting at her gate, Jennifer was organizing her third solo exhibition. This time it would be at an even more prestigious gallery, with confirmed attendance from important critics and art collectors. But what moved her most wasn't the professional recognition. It was the side project she had developed, art workshops for women going through difficult times in their lives. Partnering with David, who offered psychological support through informal conversations, they had created a space where art became a tool for self-discovery and healing. "You know the most amazing part of all this," she said to David during one of their weekly talks in the square. "What?" "Realizing that my story of suffering has turned into a source of help for others. The pain I carried for so many years now serves something useful and beautiful." "That's how life works when we stop resisting it," David replied, shaping a new piece of clay. "Our pain turns into wisdom. Our experience becomes a bridge for others crossing troubled waters." "David, can I ask you something I've always wanted to ask?" "Of course." "That first day when you showed up at my gate, how did you know I needed help? What did you see in me?" David smiled, remembering that distant day. "I saw a woman who had forgotten she was a person. I saw someone living another person's life, who no longer knew how to come home. But most of all, I saw someone who still had a flame burning inside, even if she herself didn't realize it. How could you see the flame if I couldn't even see it myself? Because sometimes, when we've been through our own darkness, we develop the ability to recognize the hidden light in others." Jennifer understood that this conversation was closing an important circle. She had become for others what David had been for her, a reminder that it's always possible to start over, that it's never too late to be who we truly are. That night, she painted her final piece for the new exhibition. It was a self-portrait, but not just of her face. It was a portrait of her soul, a woman who had walked through darkness and emerged into the light, carrying with her the wisdom of the journey and compassion for those still on the path. When she finished the painting at 3 a.m, she looked at herself in the studio mirror. The reflection she saw was of a woman she knew and liked, a woman who smiled naturally, who had her own dreams, who knew her worth regardless of others' approval. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave your honest words in the comments. Do you believe Jennifer made the right choices? We'd love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like the video, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories.